My in-laws sabotaged my job interview to keep me dependent, so I secretly got hired elsewhere, then fired their son from my new company. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and from the moment I married Daniel, I became my in-laws' full-time project. At first, I thought their constant involvement was just an overbearing kind of love, a family eager to welcome me. But that illusion cracked quickly. Daniel's mother, Elaine, had a talent for slicing me open with a smile. "Sweetheart, maybe leave the big career moves to Daniel. You're such a delicate thing," she'd say while refilling my teacup, the porcelain clink almost mocking. Her voice was always sugar, her words a slow-acting poison. His father, Harold, wasn't much subtler. He'd chuckle after dinner and toss in backhanded comments like, "That little marketing hobby of yours, fun to keep you busy, huh?" As though my ambitions were no more serious than a knitting club. Daniel would squeeze my hand under the table, his silent plea to ignore it. He wasn't cruel, just conflict-averse to the point of invisibility. I loved him, but his silence cut as deep as their words. It was like being outnumbered in my own home, even when it was just the four of us. I tried to hold on to my dream anyway, landing a high-level marketing role, something with real creative freedom. At night, after they'd finally gone home, I'd scroll through job postings, heart quickening whenever I spotted a role that matched the one I'd been building toward for years. But the walls of their presence felt closer every day. Elaine had started dropping by unannounced, rearranging my pantry for efficiency. Harold accidentally opened my mail once, claiming he thought it was a bill. Every intrusion came wrapped in a laugh, a shrug. "Nothing personal, dear." I told myself it was just family quirks. But as I sent out applications in secret, a cold unease settled in. Their smiles lingered too long. Their questions about my plans dug too deep. And when I finally received the email I'd been waiting for, I had no idea just how far they were willing to go to keep me in my place. When the email landed in my inbox, I almost dropped my coffee. "We're excited to invite you to a final round interview for the senior brand strategist position." I read it 3 times just to be sure the words weren't a cruel hallucination. My heart hammered so hard it felt like the kitchen walls were vibrating with me. This was it, the job I'd been chasing for years. The kind of position that could finally pull me out of the quiet cage my in-laws had built around me. I waited until dinner to tell Daniel, imagining his eyes lighting up the way mine had. Instead, he barely looked up from his plate. "That's nice," he said, spearing another piece of roasted chicken. "But we're doing fine as we are, right?" His tone wasn't unkind, but it dripped with something I couldn't quite name. Hesitation, maybe, or quiet fear. I forced a smile. "Fine isn't the same as fulfilled," I whispered. He gave a small shrug, the conversation sliding off him like rain on a windshield. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. From the living room, Elaine's laughter chimed at the tail end of some sitcom rerun. Harold joined in, the sound sharp like coins dropping on marble. I didn't realize they were listening until I caught the flicker of their shadows at the doorway. A brief pause in their laughter, a whisper of movement. I missed the subtle glance they exchanged, but something in the air shifted, like a draft sneaking under a closed door. I tried to shake it off, retreating to our bedroom to plan my outfit, to study the company's latest campaigns. But as I laid out my portfolio on the bedspread, a strange unease crept in. Daniel's words replayed in my head, flat and unsettling. And somewhere beyond our walls, I could almost feel a pair of unseen eyes watching, calculating, like someone had already decided my future before I'd even stepped into that interview room. The first mishap seemed harmless enough, a clumsy accident anyone could make. The night before my mock presentation, I found a dark splash of coffee staining the cream blouse I'd chosen for the interview. I'd hung it high in the wardrobe, well out of harm's way. Yet there it was, a perfect crescent of brown across the chest. Elaine peeked in as I scrubbed at the fabric in the sink. "Oh dear," she said with a flutter of her hand. "I must have knocked over my cup when I borrowed a scarf from your closet." Silly me. Her smile was soft, almost angelic. I wanted to believe her. Accidents happen. But the next morning, as I reviewed my portfolio, a chill prickled my skin. Key campaign pages, ones I'd carefully ordered, were shuffled and smudged with fingerprints. The timeline of my proudest project was missing entirely. Daniel frowned when I told him. "Maybe you misplaced them," he offered, his voice patient but distant, like he was soothing a child who'd lost a toy. I reprinted the missing pages and tried to steady my nerves. But that evening, the final straw snapped. My meticulously written prep notes saved on the family laptop had vanished. In their place was a single blank document titled Oops. Elaine chuckled when I confronted her. I was cleaning up the desktop and must have clicked the wrong thing. I'm hopeless with computers. Hopeless. Right. My pulse thudded as I sat alone later, the laptop screen casting cold light across my hands. 3 accidents in as many days, each one chipping away at my preparation, each one wrapped in a syrupy apology. Daniel kissed my forehead and told me not to stress. But the pit in my stomach only deepened. This wasn't bad luck. It was something else, something deliberate, tightening around me like invisible thread. And as the interview date loomed closer, I couldn't shake the creeping certainty that someone in this house wanted me to fail. The morning of the interview dawned sharp and cold, the kind of air that should have jolted me awake. Instead, dread prickled under my skin before I'd even opened my eyes. I had everything ready, portfolio reprinted, backup outfit pressed. All that was left was to grab my keys and leave early. But when I reached for the key hook by the door, the space was empty. I checked the side table, the kitchen counter, even the bathroom sink. Nothing. My heart rate spiked. I always left them in the same place. Elaine drifted in, her robe cinched like a smug ribbon. Looking for something? She asked lightly, as if we were playing a game of hide-and-seek. Before I could answer, Harold appeared behind her, dangling his own keys. Don't panic. I'll drive you. We'll get you there on time. His tone was reassuring, too reassuring. The clock on the wall ticked like a metronome of doom. We pulled out of the driveway and almost immediately Harold missed the turn onto the main highway. Then another. These side streets all look the same, he said with a hearty laugh, as if we weren't losing precious minutes. By the time we finally reached the downtown building, my hands were slick with sweat. I fumbled for my phone, desperate to warn the recruiter, only to find it still on the kitchen counter where someone else had left it, charging. A screen full of missed calls glared back at me when I borrowed the receptionist's phone. 10, 12. More than I could count. The receptionist's polite smile didn't soften the blow. I'm sorry, she said gently. The panel had to move on to the next candidate. I forced a professional nod, my mouth dry as chalk. My portfolio felt suddenly heavy, like a useless prop in a play I'd already lost. As I turned toward the glass doors, Harold's car idled at the curb, his grin waiting behind the windshield. And in that moment, with the city's hum pressing against the silence in my chest, I understood. This wasn't bad luck. This was an ambush, and I was already too late. That evening, the house glowed in its usual warm light, but it felt like walking into a stage set, every shadow too sharp, every smile rehearsed. I sat at the dining table, still wearing the clothes I'd worn to the interview that wasn't, my portfolio tucked under my arm like a dead weight. Elaine placed a slice of lemon pie in front of me, the tang of citrus cutting through the heavy air. You know, sweetheart, she began, her voice as smooth as the meringue peaks. Maybe you're just not cut out for that kind of pressure. Some people thrive in quieter roles. You're such a natural homemaker. Her words slid across the table like a blade wrapped in silk. I stared at the pie, at the delicate flecks of zest, and felt the pieces of the day click into place, the missing keys, the wrong turns. The phone left charging. None of it was coincidence. I excused myself before the bitterness in my throat spilled over. In the hallway, their voices carried through the cracked door to the den, Harold's low chuckle. Well, that worked out nicely. We kept her where she belongs! Elaine's laugh followed, airy and triumphant. She'll thank us one day. Daniel needs her focused on the family, not chasing silly dreams. My pulse thundered in my ears. Every word landed like a physical blow, confirming the truth I'd been too hopeful to name. Behind me, I felt rather than heard Daniel approach. He stood there silent, as if he too had heard every word. I waited for him to storm in to defend me. But he said nothing, just slipped past me into the kitchen, his face unreadable. The betrayal burned hotter than their scheming. Their cruelty I could fight. His silence, his quiet complicity, cut far deeper. I gripped the banister to steady myself, the wood cool against my trembling hands, and felt something harden inside me. Whatever they thought they'd achieved tonight, they had no idea what kind of storm they'd just awakened. I waited until the house sank into its late-night hush before I confronted Daniel. The hallway lights cast thin stripes across the carpet as I stepped into our bedroom, heart pounding with a fury I could barely contain. He sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone like nothing in the world had shifted. "I heard them," I said, my voice low but shaking. "Your parents." They admitted it. They planned everything, my keys, the car, even the phone. They made sure I missed that interview. Daniel finally looked up, eyes tired as if my words were an inconvenience. "You're overreacting," he sighed. "They only worry you'll get stressed. You've been so anxious lately, maybe this is for the best." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. "For the best?" The words scraped my throat raw. "I lost the chance I've worked years for, and you're defending them?" "They didn't mean harm," he said, voice firming now, a quiet finality to it. "They just want you happy. Happy. As if happiness meant folding myself small enough to fit the picture his parents painted. Something inside me cracked. Not a sharp break, but a slow, silent splintering. I turned away before he could see the tears gathering. Rage burned beneath my skin, but beneath the rage lay something colder. Doubt. Was I foolish to think I could ever build a career of my own? Maybe I really was fragile, as Elaine liked to hint. Maybe all those late-night applications, all those campaigns I'd poured my soul into, were just delusions of someone who'd never quite measure up. I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, knees drawn to my chest. The refrigerator hummed like a distant warning. My dreams felt like smoke slipping through my fingers. In that hollow silence, anger and despair wrestled for space in my chest. And for the first time since I'd started chasing this dream, a terrible thought crept in. Maybe it was time to give it all up. The thought of giving up lingered like smoke after a fire, but it never fully caught. By the next evening, the despair that had hollowed me out began to harden into something sharper: resolve. If Daniel and his parents thought they'd buried my ambition, they were about to learn how deep my roots could grow. I waited until the house was heavy with sleep. Daniel's soft, even breathing drifted from the bedroom as I sat at the dining table, laptop screen glowing like a tiny rebellion in the dark. My fingers trembled only once before steadying over the keyboard. I created a brand new email address, one that carried no trace of my name, no breadcrumb that Elaine could accidentally find. The job posting I'd bookmarked weeks earlier stared back at me. Global Marketing Director. Meridian & Co. A company even bigger, more prestigious than the one whose interview I'd missed. My heart thudded as I filled out every field, tailoring my portfolio into something bolder, tighter, unstoppable. When I finally hit send, the soft click of the mouse sounded louder than a gunshot. Days blurred into covert missions. I took recruiter calls during my lunch breaks, pretending I was running errands. I scheduled interviews in the thin slices of time when Elaine was out shopping and Daniel was at work. I rehearsed pitches in the car, the hum of the engine my only witness. Each secret step tightened the wire of tension. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder when the phone rang, lowering my voice when someone entered the room. My pulse raced with every hidden email, every hushed conversation. But beneath the risk surged a quiet thrill: power. For the first time in months, I wasn't their captive audience. I was the author of my own story. And as the final interview approached, the knowledge that no one in this house suspected a thing made the air electric with possibility. It was a gray Tuesday morning when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I slipped into the empty guest room, heart thudding. "Congratulations," the voice on the other end said warmly. "We're thrilled to offer you the position of Global Marketing Director at Meridian & Co." For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to expand and contract around me, the pale curtains trembling in a breeze I couldn't feel. I managed a whispered thank you, my voice cracking as the recruiter outlined the next steps. But then came the twist that made my pulse hammer for an entirely different reason. "One more detail," she continued. "Your first major assignment will be restructuring our partnership with Hartwell Dynamics. We need a comprehensive plan to evaluate which divisions are worth keeping and which will let go. Hartwell Dynamics, my father-in-law's company." I sank onto the edge of the bed, the carpet soft beneath my feet as the realization settled in. Harold had spent years bragging about the indispensable division Daniel managed, a division I knew from overheard dinner table grumbles was bleeding money. The recruiter's voice softened. "Frankly, we need someone decisive. We've heard their operations are underperforming. I pressed the phone to my ear, willing my voice to stay even. I can handle decisive, I said, each word a quiet promise. When the call ended, the silence of the house roared in my ears. The very people who had sabotaged my future had unwittingly opened a door I couldn't have planned better if I'd tried. An unexpected ally, fate, or maybe karma, had just handed me the leverage they thought I'd never hold. I stared at the closed bedroom door, the muffled sounds of Elaine clattering in the kitchen. They had no idea the balance of power had already shifted, and I intended to keep it that way. For the next several weeks, I became an actress in a play only I knew existed. By day, I slipped into Meridian & Co.'s glass-walled offices, the scent of polished wood and freshly brewed coffee wrapping around me like armor. I sat at long conference tables beside executives whose signatures could move millions, presenting strategies with a calm confidence that surprised even me. Each slide I clicked through, each plan to streamline Hartwell dynamics, drew an invisible red circle closer to Daniel's struggling division. I spoke in numbers and projections, but inside I pulsed with quiet, deliberate fire. This was the career I'd fought for, except now every decision carried a delicious undercurrent of irony. My notes on underperforming sectors were more than business. They were a scalpel aimed straight at the empire Harold thought untouchable. Then, each evening, I shed my professional skin like a secret. I'd walk through our front door carrying a grocery bag or a stack of job listings printed from the internet. Elaine would glance up from her knitting, eyes quick and assessing. "Any luck today?" she'd ask, saccharine as ever. I'd smile, small, weary, perfectly convincing. "Not yet. Maybe tomorrow." Daniel would wrap an arm around my shoulder and mutter something about patience, never guessing the power I held just beyond his reach. The duality was intoxicating and terrifying. I kept my Meridian laptop locked in the trunk of my car, my notes stored behind password walls no one else could breach. At night, while Daniel snored softly beside me, I'd scroll through project updates, heart racing as our restructuring plan moved from draft to final approval. Every passing day tightened the knot of suspense. I knew the moment of collision was coming, the instant when my two worlds would crash together. And when it did, no amount of polite smiles or sugar-coated jabs would shield them from what was about to unfold. The day of the final restructuring meeting arrived wrapped in a hush of anticipation. Meridian's top-floor conference room stretched wide and gleaming, the skyline beyond its windows a jagged silhouette against a pale morning. I stood at the head of the long mahogany table, the weight of 100 pages of data balanced in my hands. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the current of adrenaline beneath it. Around me, senior executives leaned forward, their pens poised. I clicked through the slides, each chart a scalpel slicing through Hartwell Dynamics numbers. "Our analysis shows consistent losses in one particular division," I said, letting the words settle before advancing to the next slide. "Operational costs have outpaced revenue for 3 consecutive quarters. Projected growth remains negative." The logo of Hartwell's underperforming division, Daniel's division, filled the screen. Across the table, a few eyebrows lifted. The CFO cleared his throat. "Recommendation?" "Strategic divestment," I replied, crisp and unequivocal. "Immediate." A ripple of low murmurs traveled the room. One by one, the executives nodded, some with reluctant gravity, others with brisk agreement. The vote was swift, unanimous. As the decision was recorded, the door at the far end opened. Daniel stepped in, summoned as Hartwell's representative. His eyes scanned the room, confusion flickering into shock as he caught the slide behind me. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. I kept my professional mask in place, every muscle trained to stillness. "A restructuring plan," I said evenly. "Your division will be dissolved effective immediately." For a heartbeat, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the projector. Daniel's gaze locked with mine, searching for something. Plea, explanation, betrayal. I gave him nothing. The meeting concluded in quiet efficiency. Papers shuffled, chairs scraped back. And as the executives filed out, Daniel stood frozen, the echo of his own downfall still hanging in the charged air between us. Daniel burst through the front door before I'd even hung up my coat. His tie was askew, eyes wide with the kind of disbelief that teeters between anger and fear. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, voice cracking. You led the meeting that killed my division. My job. Do you have any idea what you've done? I set my bag on the table and unbuttoned my blazer with deliberate calm. I know exactly what I've done, I said. And now you're going to hear why. He froze, chest heaving. I got that Meridian job weeks ago, I continued, my voice steady but low. After your parents sabotaged my interview, the one you told me to let go. Remember the missing keys? The wrong turns? The phone left behind? That wasn't bad luck, Daniel. That was Elaine and Harold. I heard them congratulating each other for keeping me where I belong. His face paled, the fight draining out of him. No, he whispered. They wouldn't. They did. And you knew deep down, but you chose silence. You chose them. The room thickened with a silence so sharp it hurt to breathe. I didn't plan to hurt you, I said, my voice trembling now with a controlled fury. But when Meridian assigned me to restructure Hartwell Dynamics, I didn't stop it either. I did my job. The job they tried to keep from me. The front door creaked. Elaine and Harold stepped in from their evening walk, their smiles fading when they sensed the tension. I turned to them, my eyes cold. Your empire isn't untouchable anymore. You wanted me dependent. Now your son stands exactly where you tried to keep me, powerless. No one spoke. Even the refrigerator's hum seemed to die. For the first time since I'd entered this family, the house belonged to me, and the silence was mine to command. The next morning, the house was unnervingly quiet, like a stage after the final curtain. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, laying gold across the counters where so many whispered jabs had once landed. I brewed coffee without a word. The familiar hiss of the machine felt like a new anthem. Daniel hovered in the doorway, his tie still loose from yesterday's chaos. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Whatever apology or explanation he wrestled with wasn't mine to coax out. For once, I didn't rush to fill the silence. I'm meeting with Meridian's board this afternoon, I said finally, my voice even. This is my career now. I'll decide where it goes, and I won't let anyone, family or otherwise, decide that for me again. He flinched slightly at the word family. I let it hang between us. Whether our marriage would survive wasn't a decision I was ready to make, and I didn't owe him an answer. Later, Elaine and Harold arrived unannounced, as if nothing had changed. Elaine's usual smile faltered when she met my eyes. Sweetheart, No, I said simply. You don't get to call me that anymore. You don't get to shape my choices. My life is mine. The room went still, their confidence draining like color from old photographs. I didn't need to raise my voice. The quiet certainty in my words was louder than any scream. As I walked past them toward the door, a strange lightness unfurled inside me. The same people who had plotted to keep me small had handed me the stage for my greatest triumph. Their sabotage had become the spark of my independence. Outside, the morning air tasted like possibility, brisk, electric, unclaimed. For the first time in years, I felt entirely my own. And that, more than revenge or victory, was the justice I had been chasing all along.